Okay, well, let's get started. We have it's almost 3 o'clock, so we're almost ready for the CCSN webinar. We're just going to take a couple of minutes to make sure that everybody can settle in and get admitted. And once the audience starts discovering the webinar in the real time, we're going to start with recording and the announcements. So let's just get a couple of minutes to get situated on our computer screens. And those of you who are already online, you are very welcome to use the chat and just drop your name and organization in the chat if you want to introduce yourself. We're very, very excited to see you here. We will be using today the Q&A for the questions to the speaker at the end, but you can also use the chat just if you want to share any information. If there are any technical issues, if you cannot hear us, definitely let us know. So welcome to GVSU CCESN webinar. And this is an especially timely conversation with our guest, Tanya Cabala. We had so many both biophysical and geopolitical stresses affecting our communities, especially during the past few weeks. So this conversation about resiliency cannot be more timely. My name is Elena Lubimtseva, and I'm a co-founder of GVSU Climate Change Education Solutions Network. And GVSU stands on the land of Anishinaabe people, the Three Fires Alliance of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi people who are indigenous to the Great Lakes region. And I wanted just to start with a couple of announcements from Grand Valley, because this year GVSU CCESN is also leading Global Climate Change Week, which will take place October 12th through 18th of 2026. And during the next 7 months leading to GCCW, we have just decided to host a few webinars highlighting climate change education events around the world. So we're starting, of course, close to home. I wanted to let you know that our next webinar next month, April 8th, will highlight undergraduate research on climate change, both at GVSU and internationally. So all our GVSU participants are already registered, and we have 5 student teams ready to go and present their research on April 8th. But for our international participants, we have extended abstract submission time through the end of March. So if you are an international student or national student outside of Grand Valley, and if you are interested to present, please email us your abstract, discuss it with us, and we'll be very excited to feature your research. I also want to use this opportunity to share that this speaker series would culminate with the GVSU Climate Change Education Solutions Summit that is planned October 14th, 15th at Grand Valley and online. And the topic of this summit this year is ways of knowing in climate change education. So the call for proposals has just opened, and the call for sponsors and the call for presentations and the call for registration. By the way, registration is free as always. So we would love to see you in October. And if you do have any questions or if you need more information, please visit the CCESN website at www.gvsu.edu CCS. And you can find more information. You can also sign up for our monthly free newsletter, and you would always receive this information in your mailbox every month. With this, I think everybody is online, and I see some news in the chat. So yes, keep sharing who you are if you have just joined. It is my absolute honor to introduce our speaker today, Tanya Cabala. Very few people, I think, have made such a huge positive impact on our communities and environment in West Michigan as Tanya, and many of you have probably heard about her work before. Tanya is a lifelong resident of Muskegon County, and she lives in Whitehall. And we're especially excited to have her here because she is also a Laker. She's a GVSU alumnus. She graduated from Grand Valley when it was still Grand Valley State College. She's also former state director of the Lake Michigan Federation, which is now known as the Alliance for the Great Lakes. Tanya is a lakeshore outreach organizer with West Michigan Environmental Council. And I had a great time working with Tanya for the past 2 years in this capacity because she was an invaluable contributor to GVSU ladder project, elevating youth leadership and peer learning to support climate adaptation in West Michigan lakeshore frontline communities. And it was funded by NOAA GLISA grant. So we're just about to finish this project. I'm so grateful to you, Tanya. So it's a huge thank you, not only from me, but also from all Grand Valley students who had an opportunity to work with you through this project. Tanya is also an author of numerous publications and reports on environmental threats to coastal dunes of the Great Lakes. She's a consultant, a newspaper columnist for several local newspapers. She's a book writer. She's a community organizer. She is now serving her 4th term on Whitehall City Council with a combined service of almost 14 years. And she is also a founder of Nature Walks program and a local green network in Muskegon County. Tanya received numerous awards and recognitions for her outstanding environmental work, including Mary Jane Dockery Award, Muskegon Sustainability Champion Award, and Michigan Environmental Hall of Fame Award for White Lake Restoration. So we are absolutely excited and feeling very privileged to host you today, Tanya. The screen is yours. Let me know what I can, and thank you for being here.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I didn't know that you grabbed my entire biography. That was very kind of you. Thank you for your kind words. I will start sharing my screen now, but I'm very excited because I've done what I've done for a little over 30 years, and this is really one of the most important topics I want to engage with. So I was very glad that you've asked me to give this presentation. And it is, of course, building a climate resilient community, preparedness in a time of change. And I would like to start by, by asking people to share in the chat why they were interested in this topic today. What concerns you have, what are you hoping to learn? Okay, Elena, it was not allowing me to listen to any of the questions in the chat or the topics.
And I apologize, maybe because this is a webinar setting. I start seeing, like, I don't know if you see people's posts. I can read them. One of our guests is writing, I'm a Navy veteran and understand the DoD impact to climate change and sit on a national climate board with other veterans.
Okay. Are there any other
also see the comment from, like there are several people who are introducing themselves, but I don't see many comments, and I don't know if you do have access to the chat because it looks like it goes to host and panelists, but I am not sure if the panelists can see each other's charts.
Well, I need to probably look at a different view because I can't see any of the chats or anything when I'm doing the presentation.
I see, yes.
So I'm trying to look at.
So I can see the chat and I can see the Q&A, and we don't have right now any questions in the Q&A.
Okay, then we can.
But
sure.
Maybe we can just like start and
okay.
Timing in.
Well, and please stop me because I can't see you if you're giving me any cues or anything. Okay, please share any topics as you go along, and also feel free to stop me. That's fine. So I think why this matters is so important to me, and I think Elena already mentioned it, is that we're seeing climate impacts every day in our everyday life. I mean, certainly the storms that we had last week in Michigan, the storms that we've had across the country, heavy rain, storms, extended heat, and seasonal shifts. And I certainly taking, addressing climate change is hugely important. We really have to, but at the same time, we need to work on preparedness so that we can reduce harm to our communities, we can reduce disruption, and certainly cost.
Tanya, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I don't see your slides right now. Are you sharing them?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Technology. Hang on just a
I
moment.
know there are too many things.
Okay. I here, let me um
I
I
saw
will
your
I will
slides at the beginning, and then I think we
yeah,
lost them.
sorry about that. Is it better this way or would you like it full? Because when I do it this way, I can see you.
I think it doesn't matter. I think you probably don't need to see me because we're recording you right now.
Okay.
That's why I want you to
Okay.
see here. But let's just click on from beginning so that we can see you would be.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Elena already went over my background. I'm actually entering my 15th year as White House City Council member, and that actually informs a lot of the work that I do, especially this particular topic. And I apologize for all the heavy content. I'm going to make this available to Elena as a PDF, so you will have this information there. And I wanted to quickly go over climate change and put some information there just in case people aren't necessarily familiar with it. I mean, I talk to a lot of folks and they don't always understand what it is. They've heard the term. Sometimes they think it means the weather, which is it's not the weather. And I think it's very important for all of us to be talking about climate change and know the best ways of talking about it. And I wanted to put that the IPCC is one of the probably the top source, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Their work is fed by thousands of scientists globally who provide their peer-reviewed studies to the IPCC for inclusion in their large global reports on what's happening. And their job is to provide the governments with scientific information to develop climate policies. So they regularly put out reports about the state of climate change. Um, so I always recommend this for folks. And one of the things that I have found pretty effective when I've talked to people about climate change is just the greenhouse effect. I think people are very visually oriented for them to imagine, that there's this greenhouse effect around the earth, warming the earth's surface, and then the earth's surface, that has the, um, melting of the glaciers and raising of the oceans and affecting all of the different cycles. I think sometimes that has helped when I've talked with folks. And then I just put something from NASA with some of the effects. And I think this is important. I remember a few years ago talking to an acquaintance, and he thought that the only impact of climate change was the sea level rise, and he was not aware that there are many other impacts from global climate change. And but the emissions there, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and then I also like to talk to people about the largest emitters of these greenhouse gas emissions, which is transportation, electricity production, and industry in the U.S., which are the largest sources. Oops. And also just the idea that the goal has been to try to limit the warming to no more than 1.5 Celsius from pre-industrial times. Anybody have any questions? And then what that can look like locally, certainly our heavier rain events, stronger storms, heat waves, and then just our changing seasonal patterns. And you're thinking, well, I thought this was about climate, building a climate resilient community. It is. And I wanted to make distinguish between mitigation, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, things like clean energy efficiency, and adaptation. I find that another useful way to talk with folks, to divide it into two buckets. Mitigation is what we have to do for the future, shapes the future climate. Adaptation is what we need to do right now to prepare and manage the current conditions and the changing conditions, like stormwater planning, emergency preparedness. And then, of course, resilience is how well can we handle these disruptions and our recovery. So today we're going to talk more about adaptation and resilience. I'm going to use my city as a case study, and we're going to talk about some practical actions for a number of different audiences, and then I'm going to provide some resources. So what I think is really stunning is I live in a very small city. We have less than 3,000 people. We're very small geographically, and in one 12-month period, not calendar, but in one 12-month period, we had 3 freak extreme storms. October 2023, we had an early snowstorm. All of our trees were still leafed out. It damaged many of our city's trees and cut power, and it caused, some pretty devastating disruption. June 2024, we had a severe windstorm that caused major destruction. I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth about that one. And then in September, we had a heavy rainstorm that washed out one of our major streets. So you can imagine that might tax our budget and tax our city departments and our community. So the June 2024 windstorm was, I believe it was probably one of the worst storms that we have had. Winds may have approached up to 100 miles per hour, several hundred trees downed, many of them in a neighborhood where the trees were about 200 years old, a very old neighborhood. Many homes were severely damaged. 18 homes had to be destroyed. There were power outages, and the city ended up using about $600,000 from its general fund for response and recovery. And then I'm going to actually go on and show you. Now, I have to admit, this is a Muskegon photo. This storm also hit the Muskegon area, and I happened to catch this photo of the Muskegon area folks who have the storm coming in. And it is quite threatening. And certainly stop me wherever you like and ask questions. I'm almost thinking we may have had more than several hundred trees down, remembering this. This actually is, I believe, if I'm looking at it, it's a street that my dad lived on. So the roads were impassable. The fire authority chief, he talked about how it took his men 2.5 hours to cut through the trees to get to some of the major sites of devastation. One couple ended up running to their garage. It was early in the morning, around 6 a.m., and there was no warning. And they got trapped in there. They had to be rescued. As you can see, the trees were huge. One of the things that we're finding is that, especially when we've had these huge rains and then windstorms, that the trees will pull up like this because the ground is so saturated. Also, because we've had a number of storms, the trees are also vulnerable and weaker. This big tree fell on that house. As you can imagine, we had many questions about tree removal and insurance, and our city actually brought in after a speaker to talk about how best that folks could work with their insurance companies to get the best results. That was one of the things I was glad that we were able to do. We have our bike path that was completely impassable. Another huge tree up. there are places where these trees are still down like this. They were off kind of in areas that were not built up, and they were kind of cut back as much as they could. But you can still see the devastation. There's one of my friends in there, and you can see this house on the right. I'm not sure if that's one. That might be another one. There was one house that had a huge tree that fell right down the middle, and the occupant was not there. But if he had been there, he would have been killed. That it fell right on top of his bed. So he was very lucky to have been gone that day. You can see the mess. And can you imagine waking up to this? And you see all of the damage here. To the left, that one, there were folks who had drones, and I'm pretty sure it's that house or one next to it that the occupant, the resident, is still not into her house. She apparently, she said she was underinsured, and the rebuilding rate is quite a bit more than what she had it insured for. But it was also, pretty devastating as well. Our folks were out and everybody worked really hard to get this cleared up. We had to cordon off a sizable neighborhood because it was so dangerous with all the lines down and all the trees down. So anyway, there's many more photos, but I imagine that shows the the devastation that we had just in our little city. And then of course there were the problems throughout the county. And I think is going over with the lessons, we were very lucky. Nobody was hurt. I drove around when I could, when it was safe to drive around, and I was astounded that nobody was hurt. And I think it's definitely a miracle. But we all know that we may not always be that lucky, and so we're doing more preparation now. So there was an existing emergency plan, and it had not been tested, but the different departments were able to use that to guide the response. All of the departments and local organizations worked together well, and our DPW director said, relationships matter. Everybody knew everybody and knew how to work together, and that made a huge difference. We realized that we need a better warning system. There was no warning for this storm. And in years past, we had an old tornado siren, and it was dismantled probably about 5 or 6 years ago because it was getting older. It was expensive to operate, and the repairs were expensive as well. We now have a text alert system that folks can sign up to, but we certainly need to have outreach for those without cell phones. And one of the lessons that staff told me is that because we always have a conservative fund balance, it's making infrastructure upgrades more possible. For example, lift stations and things like that. So going forward, making sure our infrastructure is appropriate to the flooding that we might have, or different impacts from storms. Any questions right now?
So Tanya, you cannot see the chat, right? Then I can read
No,
questions from the chat. Okay, so I have a very interesting question coming from Albie Bronzel. Because of Whitehall size, do you think it was harder for residents to get assistance, unlike maybe bigger cities such as Muskegon or Grand Rapids? I think it's an excellent question.
Harder?
Yes.
No, I would probably say we're a very small geographic area, so I would probably say easier. City Hall is less than a mile from everybody. So it's and everybody knows everybody. So um, uh, I think it was probably easier. I think the biggest challenge was this storm came across the big lake, and there was no warning for folks. It just hit, and they had to take cover. And um, there were many houses that were covered in trees, and it happened so quickly. So I don't know, and I'm probably not the best person to speak to because I've lived about that. I've lived in a small community all my life, and so I'm a little more comfortable saying what's appropriate for us or what's typical.
Yeah, I kind of had the same question. I was just wondering, like in terms of technical capacity, in terms of resources, in terms of access to machinery, in terms of financial resources, like what are your thoughts between, comparing challenges of small communities like Whitehall versus larger cities who, probably just have a little bit more resources available for them?
Well, sure. I definitely think, like I mentioned, we had three freak storms in a 12-month period. And I don't have the numbers on the other two, but that's overtime for our Department of Public Works folks. It's um, chipping trees, removing trees, taking care of the materials. It takes a toll on our equipment. And so I think my biggest concern, or one of my biggest concerns, is going forward. How are we going to be able to afford this? That's over $500,000 out of our general fund. So I think things went very well, and I do really chalk that up to everybody working together so well. And I think that's the benefit of a small community is folks, just chipping in and helping out. We did interact with county emergency planning, and we also, I think we were part of the county effort to get disaster declaration, but we were not able to. The county was not able to, which I I, I was surprised at.
That's surprising. Tanya, if you allow me, I would also read a comment from John Forson, who is saying, I'm a long time climate student, very concerned for best possible sustainable outcomes. We must reinvent our lives and the way we live. I don't know if you have any
Is that a question about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or is that planning for the impacts?
This goes back, I think, to our earlier comments that you have invited from the public, so they're probably coming a little bit later my way. So I don't know if you want to take this comment. There are many more comments, so it would
Oh,
be
sure.
difficult right now to take them all. Let me know
Do
if
you
you
want
want
me?
me.
Do you want
Yeah,
me to
let me
go?
know if you want to take just maybe one or two questions, and then we can have more questions at the end.
Sure, sure. Why don't you pick a few, and then I'll make sure to handle all of them at the end.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And can you repeat that one? I wasn't quite sure what the question was.
So yes, John essentially, like saying that we would need to reinvent our lives as we are kind of moving forward with adaptation to climate change. So I was wondering if you have any
Oh,
thoughts.
absolutely. We absolutely we need to be doing so many things. We need to, certainly, do the mitigation that, reducing our own greenhouse gas emissions. Although I tell folks, we're probably past the time um, that the voluntary efforts are going to make a big difference. We need to really get at the big sectors: transportation, industry, electricity productions. We need to tackle the folks who are making the major emissions, and we need to mandate some changes. And that takes a lot of political will. And the more that that folks can talk to other folks about climate change and explain it so that friend to friend, family member to family member, we've got to, get folks in office that are committed to making these mandated changes. And then we do have to change how we live. We need to, think about our homes and heating and cooling. We need to think about the materials that we use in our infrastructure. Are they going to handle the extreme temperatures that we will have? Are there, and then I've definitely have things that people can do, but as I have said to Elena many times, I think many problems, many opportunities. We're definitely in a very seriously challenging time period, but we also have the ability to make changes that can make our lives better and the lives of those who come after us. And I really focused on probably the smallest things that I could choose, because there's probably hundreds of things that we could be doing, whether you're an individual or a local government official or, work for the county or state and federal government. But there are some basics. Is there another one that you wanted to ask, Elena?
Yes, we have another question from Onoja Favor, Onoja Favor Ojo Dale. And he is writing, greetings, dear hosts and panelists. I am an environmental and analytical chemistry student with special interests in climate action, sustainability, and recycling. What are the major human activities that contribute to climate change, and how do they impact environment? Also, what is the connection between plastic pollution and climate change? And thank you, Anoja, for this great question.
Well, I think the first one, I didn't necessarily prepare materials on the second one, plastic pollution. I think the biggest, we've got to tackle the biggest sources. And like I mentioned, in the US, the top one is transportation. We need to be looking at, as much renewable energy possible that we can, solar, wind. I happen to, live in this community my entire life, and I was very sad to see in the 1990s a very strong and successful effort to stop wind installations along Lake Michigan. People just didn't want to see the windmills there, and out in the lake where the wind was, probably the best, or even along the lake shore. Now I live in an area where there's a huge anti-solar sentiment. And, it's frustrating to be in a place where I always thought we would address climate change. And I never imagined people would be against renewable energy, wind and solar. And in particular, there's a movement against solar nationwide, against the large scale solar. The effort is to put them in rural areas because it's the large scale solar installations that we need to make the biggest gains. So, it's great when people want to put them on their roofs, but that's more expensive, and it's a lot harder to get, a couple hundred people in your community to put their solar on their roof versus a company putting in a large scale solar installation. They need to, it's a shame because there's a lot of misinformation going around, and I understand people don't like change, and they they like looking at the rolling farmlands, and this feels like a big change. And so I think it's a little easy to believe that it can be a damaging technology. It's certainly not perfect, either one, but yeah, I think we need to target the largest sources. We need to really start learning how to talk about this with our friends and neighbors so that they will support the things that we need to do. Did that answer your question? As far as plastic pollution, that I guess the biggest thing that I can say about that relating to climate change is, plastic is made from petroleum. And so, and making it is a hugely polluting process. Then you get into the, the microplastics and all of that impact, and that's pretty scary. I remember years ago, um, ran an Adopt a Beach program along Lake Michigan, and we would do it once a year in September. There's still folks who do it, and catalog everything that we found. It was part of the International Coastal Cleanup, and it was interesting to see what was found, and then we used that information, in policy work, because we didn't necessarily just want to be out there picking up trash. Not that that's a bad thing, but we wanted to say, hey, this is what we're finding. How can we make sure that these things are not showing up on our beaches? One thing that I've noticed lately is way more plastic ending up on the beaches, both from, things that are brought to the beach and things that are washed up in the lake, dropped off boats and things. I'm not sure if that actually answered your question.
And I think it's an excellent answer. And no, just saying thank you so much. So I have a few more questions in the chat, but I was wondering, I know that you are still kind of, in 2/3 through your presentations. I also don't want to hold you with this question. So perhaps we can just save the rest of the questions to the end after the presentation. What do you think?
I would like to do that if possible, unless somebody has to leave or there's a burning question. I am more comfortable talking to people when I can see their faces, if that's a possibility. So I'd like
This is not a possibility, unfortunately, because it's a webinar setting. So
Oh,
our guests would not be able to unmute
oh,
themselves.
okay.
They can only send us questions through the chat.
Oh,
So that's
okay.
unfortunately.
Oh,
We'll have to save it for the next event in person.
Okay, sure. Well, I think, why don't I go through this, and I can certainly stop with, wherever you see fit to stop and ask questions. I divided this up into what individuals can do, what community groups can do, what local government can do, and then what state and federal government can do. So it's a little lot. It's a lot to take in, but I like to divide that up, so I think it's easier for people to see in their mind rather than be overwhelmed with the maze of things that can be done at all different levels. One of the things that the guys at our Department of Public Works said is, they said, tell people to check for flood insurance. They said, check your insurance, make sure that it's a line item. They said, it's something that we need to be doing now. It's not something that, people just used to do that on the sea coast, but we need to be doing that as well. And they also mentioned a little bit down below, put a sump pump backup or check for existing systems. So sign up for emergency alerts. There are a number of different ones. We have this text to government one that for our city, and maybe other cities have them. There's also one on the FEMA website when I get down there. Know where your cooling and warming centers are located. I usually routinely ask my city to post where the cooling centers are when the temps get over a certain the cooling, when temps get high enough, because I know that not everybody has air conditioners, and some folks have, sensitive systems, and our city actually opens up during the day for people as well. And warming centers, if people are out of power and don't have generators, really important to assemble a basic 72-hour emergency kit: water, food. There's make sure that you have something to charge your cell phone, and not a hard thing to do, to have. Check on your elderly neighbors, or just check on your neighbors. I think that's one thing that it's very important for being a resilient community, is know who's in your neighborhood, know who might need some help during a heat wave or a power outage. Then we get to the replace impervious driveway with permeable. That's, the less pavement that we have, then the less groundwater recharge we have, and the ability to hold floodwaters. Upgrade your insulation or weather sealing, and attend a local planning or zoning meeting or your council meeting. As someone who I've mentioned, I've been on for 15 years now. It's very important. I'm always glad to see people in the audience who have something to say. It's a lot easier than most people realize. You usually only have 3 minutes anyway. But I tell people to come and say what's on their mind, and then it lets us know, so that we can make sure that what we hear from people are our priorities as well, because we are doing our work for the people in our community. I think this is a really good diagram. It's from ready.gov, FEMA, and I like it because it's a nice visual. You know, the 3-day supply of food, water, medications, battery, solar powered phone charger, spare batteries. I have a hand crank powered radio that's pretty cool. First aid, flashlight. You know, so think about what you might need in the event that there's an emergency. Here's what community groups can do. They're very important. They can share heat safety and flood safety information through social media and the newsletters. I see this on my own Facebook feed, where groups will post cooling or warming centers in the county, host a climate preparedness talk at a library, a church, or a senior center, maybe create a volunteer phone tree, partner with a food pantry. I know that ours is definitely noticing more needs in the community, and then just encourage backup power planning for critical services. This is long, and I apologize. I'm just going to pick a few of them that and then, like I said, I'm going to give this out as a PDF. Upgrading infrastructure is really important. We are looking, Michigan Department of Transportation is going to be doing some road work and replacing the bridge, or fixing the bridge between the city of Whitehall and Montague. And ideally, they are looking at the fact that we have extreme highs and lows of water. That's one of the impacts in Michigan, is extreme changes in our water levels. And we have had flooding. We've had people from either side who can't get across, and they get frustrated. They have to go down to an exit and take the long way. We're not used to not getting over to our sister city quickly. Update zoning to allow for more tree planting and green space. Definitely more trees is very important, both for absorbing CO2, but also just for coolness. Oops, I went too far. Budget annually for things that you need. If they're very involved, they could conduct a formal climate vulnerability assessment to see where in particular they might have things that they need to upgrade or pay attention to. Post emergency preparedness information clearly on the website. Add climate language to master plans. Master plans for communities, for cities, villages, townships, that's the vision. And then your ordinances are the implementation. So as much as we can get some of this language into our visioning, that we are a safe community from climate impacts, I think that's going to be important. And then update emergency operation plans. So there's a lot that can be done. County government, a little different. I think we have a good county emergency planning department. The more that they can make sure that what they do gets out to the rest of the county, collecting climate impact data, coordinating shared emergency shelters, looking at vulnerable populations, coordinating consistent emergency messaging, aligning their public health and their emergency management efforts, and putting climate risk into hazard mitigation plans. Maybe we should be looking at shared climate resilience goals. So, going back to the lesson that the DBW folks from my city said, they work together well, so the more that we can start making more connections, I think the better that we will work together. State and federal government, now you'll say, well, what does it have to do with the local, our local community? Well, it has a lot, because they provide the funding, for pre-disaster mitigation. A lot of the money that we get for updating our infrastructure comes from the state or federal government, and then climate data. They've got revolving loan funds, and making sure that their agencies are coordinating across agencies for hazard planning, so, funding, and then some of these larger activities, that they're a huge resource. And one of the things I thought about when I was doing some research for this was some of the websites that have changed so much that they don't have the information that I was used to seeing. So that's, certainly information is a huge one as well. All levels working together. I'm just going to pick out a few. I think it's important to address inequities that increase climate vulnerability. They're going to be vulnerable populations and neighborhoods that will experience climate impacts more than others. We need to make sure that we pay attention to that. We need to be looking at climate resilience in all of our decisions. We need to move vulnerable infrastructure out of harm's way. Land use decisions are very important. So that's why it's important to go to your zoning meeting or your planning, because a lot of those are related to development. And, are we looking at where we're putting things? And does that make sense for the impacts that we know are happening or going to happen? And then also population shifts. I remember years ago, I looked at a popular science magazine about climate change, and the authors of this article had done a study of all of the potential climate impacts of every state, and they concluded that everybody was going to move to Michigan. So we have comparatively fewer impacts than other states. There are going to be states that are going to be really challenged. Any of those that are along the coastline, certainly out west, folks have even said that Arizona may not be livable at some point. And so we are going to have some climate refugees here. And so we need to be planning for those changes. And I think I read in the article that they said, yeah, everybody's going to move to Michigan until they live a winter there. So maybe that won't happen. These resources you can look on your own, but these are some of the most important ones for resiliency. NOAA, and I gave you the specific website as well. The Michigan Healthy Climate Plan, that's our state's plan. Michigan Sea Grant, they've got a really great coastal resilience hub. MSU Extension has a lot of educational information. FEMA has their ready.gov website that has a lot of emergency preparedness information. Oops, I see that I spelled MSU Extension has I put them twice, so I have to remove that. Apologies for that. I think, and I'm guessing most folks who have attended already know that climate change is no longer a future issue. But we can reduce harm by preparing now, strengthening our local systems, and working together. And so do we want to have some more questions here? I might want to scroll down one time just to thank the folks that gave me some advice, and then some people who gave me photos as well. And then I'll maybe just go here and then see if people have questions.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your contact information. So this is really great. You can just take the picture and contact Tanya if you want to talk to her after the presentation. So I'm going to take a couple of more questions from the chat. And so there is a great question about the Department of Defense that has whose CO2 output is comparable to their CO2 output of entire industrial countries like Sweden or Germany. The bombing of the refinery in Iran will impact everyone, just as ending war would impact our environment. So I don't know if you want to take this question.
Well, that wasn't really necessarily something I prepared for, but I can comment on it. I do pay attention to politics, global issues. We are far behind in dealing with CO2 emissions, and certainly the Department of Defense is huge. And anytime you have a war like this, and you know that what's being done that will impact climate change as far as the emissions, and then also there's always something else that we deal with rather than climate change. I keep thinking that we're going to deal with climate change, and now there's this war where somebody thinks it's fun to be at war, and certainly there are things that we need to deal with globally, but we really need to do all we can to get the big folks up there ramping down their CO2 emissions, and that includes Department of Defense. But it also begs the question that we all, as a nation, need to know more about our own energy uses and how that impacts us and how it impacts vulnerable countries that didn't even contribute as much to the problem as we did, because we've been industrialized so much longer. I have talked with some folks who don't support solar in our community, and sometimes I've asked them, so, well, what energy source do you use? And most times people don't know. So I think, education, knowledge is just a huge part of it. And I just continue to encourage people to talk to people in your trusted groups. Talk to your family members, talk to your people at church, people in community groups. And, I think, we are way behind schedule, but that's one thing that always will help. If somebody's at least open to listening. I think sometimes it just takes hearing it over and over again. And it's not a usual topic of conversation, but I will tell you, I spoke with a young woman that I know, and I explained to her what climate change was. And she said, that's the first time I finally understood it. Thank you very much.
That's excellent. This is important. I will take a couple of more questions from the chat, and I just wanted to remind you that we have both chat and Q&A, so then I will also take a few questions from the Q&A. So Marian Cook is writing, more than 2 decades ago, I was part of the Urban Ecology Collaborative. And at one event, we did a SWOT analysis for Pittsburgh. I put climate refugee in all 4 quadrants, and hearing it from more than one source. Yes. Any thoughts, any questions? And Marian, if you want to let us know exactly what is the question, or is it more like anticipation of is it a comment or a question? Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I haven't read the whole question. And herein from more than one source. The letter comment was in response to Tanya's statement just now, hearing it and over again. Thank you.
Very important. And it doesn't seem like that much, but the more that people do that, and I just keep encouraging people to, try to explain this very complicated issue in as basic terms as you can. That's one reason why I like to divide it up into mitigation, because a lot of times when you're reading, articles and things, you read about mitigation and like, what is that? Adaptation. But those are really just, reductions and preparing for impacts. And then people say, oh, hey, okay, I understand what you mean. I also think the IPCC info is really good because I remember talking about it to somebody and she said, well, I really prefer independent, scientific studies rather than the IPCC. And I'm like, well, then you're in luck. The IPCC takes peer-reviewed independent studies from thousands of scientists globally and uses that to create their reports. So I think that's important to people to know that this is thousands of scientists and it's independent.
Yeah, you certainly cannot find something more independent than IPCC.
Yeah. Oh, it is the top source that I recommend to people.
Thank you. We have a comment from John Forslin saying that we need to educate legislators. And I know that you have lots of experience with this. So would you like to share your experience about educating legislators?
Well, sure. And certainly I want to disclose too that I ran for state representative in 2018 and did not win, but it was quite an experience. And I think one of the things I loved the best was going door to door. I miss, meeting people at their doors. That became something I really enjoyed, that connection. And I think there's a huge challenge with politicians at all levels in that climate change, the environment is not a voting issue. It hasn't been, it never has been, and I'm hoping in my lifetime to see it as a voting issue. And when I get disappointed when I hear a major candidate give a talk and not mention climate change. On the other hand, we are in such times that's unfortunately not likely to win them their seat because people are looking at other issues that they feel are closer, that impact them more. Climate change always feels far out or they don't believe it because of all of the misinformation. So I guess I would say be patient with politicians when they're running, but offer to help inform and educate them and also give them, get them connected to groups where they can, get enough knowledge to, to pass some legislation that really matters. I don't know if that's helpful. Is there a follow-up to that?
I think we'll probably have many more follow-ups, I'm absolutely sure, and that's why I'm so grateful for you sharing your contact information. This is not a small discussion, and those are so many, opportunities to, I think, build on your presentation and engage more in the climate action in our community and worldwide. But unfortunately, our time together is coming to an end. It's 4 o'clock, and I know that many of you have to leave. That's the time when it's time to say goodbye. So once again, many thanks to Tanya for this absolutely wonderful presentation, and please send Tanya your emoji thanks or applause or send your thanks through the chat. Once again, thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to see you all in 1 month for the virtual climate change symposium with Grand Valley students and global students. And once again, thank you, Tanya, for this very enlightening talk.
Well, do not hesitate to reach out to my email with questions. And Elena, I'd be happy to look at the questions because that will help me with this presentation going forward too. So if there's a way to grab those questions off the chat.
Yeah, the chat will be available. And again, thank you, Tanya. We will share the presentation video on CCSN YouTube channel, and it will be also available under the video assets on our website. If you are new to the Climate Network, our website is www.gvsu.edu/CCES with one S at the end, and you will find Tanya's video and many other videos there. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening.
Yep. Thank you so much.